Alright, don't confuse, in terms of natural selection, struggle for existence, survival of the fittest. Alright. These phrases, alright, they're implying that there's a direct competition between individuals. Alright, for example, reproduction, mating rights, which is true. Alright, but that's not natural selection, or all of it. Alright. Natural selection is about differential reproductive success. Alright, individuals who have traits that make them better suited for the environment. Alright, maybe they're better at acquiring nutrients. Alright, so they can lay more eggs. Or they're better with blending in with their environment, so they evade predation. Alright, here you're not talking about competition, but here you're talking about traits that allow the individual to be better suited to its environment, so that it has a greater likelihood of mating, reproducing, and producing more offspring for future generations. Alright, so the relative fitness is a contribution that an individual makes to the gene pool of the next generation compared to everyone else in the population. Alright, recall that natural selection is targeting the phenotype and indirectly the genotype of individuals. Alright, so there are three typical types of natural selection mechanisms, alright, or forms. We have stabilizing, directional, disruptive. Okay. Natural selection, that's stabilizing. Alright, the intermediate phenotype is going to be selected for, while those that are at the very end of the curve, alright, so you have a nice little bell-shaped curve, alright, so here, individuals in the middle are selected for, individuals at the end are selected against, alright, so stabilizing selection, alright. Directional selection, individuals at one of the extremes of your nice little bell-shaped curve are selected for. All the others are eliminated or selected against. Okay. And then here, in terms of disruptive, individuals with an intermediate phenotype are selected against, while those at the extremes are favored. Right? So we'll talk about the different patterns you'll see as a result of each of these selection processes. Alright, we'll talk about examples of each. Alright, so to summarize, alright, directional, disruptive, and stabilizing. Alright, so we have this population of mice, alright, and you see a gradient of individuals within that population, right, of varying fur colors, alright, from really dark to really light. So here, as a result of natural selection acting on its population, right, you can have directional, disruptive, and stabilizing. If it's directional, one of the phenotypes is selected for, alright, while the other phenotypes are selected against. Alright, so here, if you eliminate the white and lighter coated mice in the population, let's say that you have a environment that's a little bit darker, right? These mice might stand out to predators a little bit easier than the darker coated ones. Alright, so as a result, they are preyed upon, those alleles are eliminated from the population, and you see this directional shift in the population structure. Alright, to those that are more favored, with darker fur coat. Here, alright, for disruptive, the intermediate phenotype is selected against, or those that fall in the middle. Alright, so the ones at the ends are favored. Alright, so you basically have a inverted bell curve. Those at the extremes are favored. Really light, really dark. Those in between are selected against. Here, if you have selection against individuals at both extremes, alright, those in the middle are favored. Alright, this is an example of stabilizing selection. Alright, so looking at directional selection, look at the overall average value of the traits before and after selection. Alright, you have a nice bell-shaped curve. Those here are low fitness, here are high fitness, and you see a shift. Individuals with the lower fitness are selected against, so you see a shift in the curve to the right. Alright, so let's talk about some birds, some swallows. So a 6-day cold snap causes the bird's primary food of insects to disappear. So the body size of survivors was much larger than that of birds that died. Right, so why is it that the larger birds survived? Well, the researchers suggested that it had to do with the fat stores. And they didn't get as cold as the smaller birds. Therefore, were less likely to die due to exposure and starvation. Alright, so let's look at this. Look at the directional selection. Alright, so here you have your before. Alright, the catastrophic cold snap. You have a nice little bell-shaped curve. And then after, here, alright, this is the point where you have the cold snap. Your surviving population isn't here. Alright, so these are going to be the larger birds. All the ones that have a body size less than 6 or 5, based on the class sizes, how they chose to classify them, were eliminated from the population. Those with larger body sizes were selected for. They survived. So as a result, you see a shift in the population structure the next couple of generations. More of those individuals in the population have a larger body size. And that will occur, as long as you have new alleles coming in, more birds of a smaller body size coming in, alright, the population structure has changed. That doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way. It can shift depending on how the environment changes. Okay. Stabilizing selection. Alright, so here you're selecting for the intermediate phenotype. Alright, so you're basically selecting against the extreme values, where the intermediate phenotype is favored. Alright, so let's look at human newborns. Alright, so mortality rates are high for premature infants and those that are really big. Babies of average birth weight are the most likely to survive. Alright, so here, evidence for this stabilizing selection. Alleles associated with high or low birth weight are subjected to purifying selection. Alright, so removal of those alleles out of the population. Alleles associated with intermediate body birth weight increased in frequency in the population. Alright, so here you're looking at the extremes, so that individuals of too low, too high of a birth weight are selected against. All right, individuals of the intermediate phenotype, intermediate birth weight, are selected for. All right, those at the end, you see a higher mortality rate. Disruptive selection, you're selecting against the intermediate phenotype. All right, so that means that those at the ends are selected for. Okay, so at the extremes. So you can get a nice little inverse bell curve. So looking at, again, birds, all right, black-bellied sea crackers. All right, so individuals with very long and individuals with very short beaks survive the best. Individuals with the intermediate phenotype are at a disadvantage. All right, so seed size is the agent that results in natural selection. Small beak birds eat small seeds. Large beak birds eat large seeds. All right, but your intermediate beaked linked birds have difficulty cracking the small and the large seeds. So here you see the medium-sized beaks being selected against. All right, because think about it, those individuals aren't going to be getting enough nutrients. All right, so as a result, less energy. Right, where you divert that energy to, keeping your body warm, producing offspring. And so over time, you'll see fewer and fewer intermediate size or medium size beaked birds. All right, and the extremes are favored. Now again, this depends upon, within a population, the amount of the food supply. All right, so if you have a steady or relatively large supply of small and large seeds, then those birds, the smaller and larger beak size, will survive. All right, so here you're seeing a nice little bell-shaped curve. All right, but then when you see a depletion of the seeds that the intermediate birds prey upon, they're left with small and large, and they don't feed on those as well. All right, so since they don't get nutrients as readily, all right, they're not going to be able to breed, they're not going to be able to produce as much offspring, and so over time you see natural selection preying upon those intermediate, medium-sized beaks birds. All right, and those of the extremes are favored. All right, balancing selection. Balancing selection maintains alleles within a population. All right, there's no single allele that has an advantage. All right, so you have variation. For example, balancing selection can occur when heterozygous individuals have a higher fitness than homozygous individuals do. All right, so here, one of the things you're going to read about is sickle cell anemia. All right, individuals that are heterozygous for the sickle cell anemia allele are at a better advantage to surviving malaria. All right, so individuals where malaria is more predominant, you tend to see individuals of a heterozygous genotype for sickle cell anemia. All right, so that particular genotype is favored. All right, frequency-dependent selection. We'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so here, looking at balancing selection. All right, we have HLA-A and HLA-B. All right, so these are your MHC surface marker genes. All right, 2 of them at least. And looking at your observed and expected values. All right, for homozygous individuals, you observe 38, you would expect 48. For HLA-A, you'd observe 21, you would expect 30. Right? Heterozygous individuals are much higher. 84 compared to what you would expect 74. You observe 101 compared to expected 92 for HLA-B. So here, individuals of a heterozygous genotype are much higher than the expected values. Alright, so there has to be some form of a advantage. Looking at frequency dependent selection. Alright, so here the traits that are favored will change over time depending on the frequency of the individuals in the population. Alright, so here you have these fish, alright, that feed on the scales of much larger fish species. Alright, and over time you'll see that on the y-axis the left mouth individuals, the frequency in the population of the left mouth individuals changes from year to year. Alright, that has to do with the fact that these fish, alright, individuals with a mouth on the left side, they tend to prey on larger fish, feeding on their scales, on the right side. The fish with a right mouth prey on the left side of the fish. Alright, so here, looking at 1981, you had more predominant left mouth fish. Alright, that was more predominant. And then next couple of years that became less predominant and more right side fish. Alright, so here the right side mouth fish became more predominant. Alright, so here the idea is that individuals who are part of the minority of the population, next couple of generations, they become more predominant because these fish, alright, begin to adapt to the fish that are preying on their scales. Alright, if you have more of those that attack on the right side, alright, they get used to that. So the ones that are preying on the left side, alright, they don't notice it as much. Alright, so these individuals reproduce more often, and so they become more predominant in a couple of generations. But then these fish again adapt to that, and the fish that prey on the right side become more predominant. So the ones with the left-sided mouth. So they increase in frequency. And this changes over time. Alright, so this keeps variation in the population. Alright, so here, this is a nice summary slide. Alright, it's really good to use for when you're studying for an exam. You want to compare what the graph or figure looks like for directional and stabilizing and disruptive and balancing, what's occurring and what's being represented by this graph, the description of it. Alright, so evolution, adaptive evolution, is constantly changing. Alright, so traits at one point in time that are advantageous are not necessarily always advantageous. Alright, so other traits can be selected for that were previously considered weak. So it depends upon the environment. Alright, so one of the common complaints about evolution that some individuals have is, why doesn't natural selection fashion the perfect organism? You know, why haven't humans evolved the ability to have wings and fly? Alright? it's a completely ludicrous argument, all right? But it's something you come across. It's pretty common, all right? The reason being is because selection can act only on existing variations. So it can only act on the variations that exist within a population. It can only select against phenotypes, indirectly the genotypes, the alleles that exist in a population, the genes that exist in a population. Evolution is not forward thinking, okay? Evolution is all about the here and the now. Now, adaptations may be compromises. Okay. So you may have, for instance, let's say the ability to produce more eggs, right? Meaning that you have the ability to produce more offspring. But think about it. That comes at a much more energetic cost. Alright, so an adaptation also has a little caveat attached to it. Alright, you also have sexual selection. Alright, so sexual selection can lead to differences in secondary sex characteristics, sexual dimorphisms. Alright, clear physical distinctions between males and females of a species. Alright, so you can have intra-sexual selection. Alright, so competition between females, competition between males for a mate. Alright, intersexual selection occurs between your females, typically your females choosing males. Typically, for the most part, females are choosers for a mate because they tend to exert more of a energetic cost to producing offspring. Energetic cost of producing eggs, energetic cost of obtaining more nutrients to allow for the eggs to grow and develop. Once those eggs have grown and developed, laying the eggs, and then also caring for the young. Alright, so how do these sexual selections evolve in terms of female preference for males? One idea is the good gene hypothesis, is that females are looking for a fit, healthy male because a fit, healthy male has good genes. And so those genes are going to be passed on to future offspring. Alright, so here we have we have gray tree frogs, we have males and females, and we have gray tree frogs, males that have a short call, and males that have a long call. Alright, so here, the question is, are the females going to favor the short call males, or are they going to favor the long call males? Well, here, in 1995, the long call was better in terms of larval survival. In 1996, they didn't determine. No significant difference. Alright, that's what NSD means. Larval growth, 1995, long call was better. Time for metamorphosis to go from the tadpole to the frog, to the adult frog, the long call is better than the shorter call. Alright, so why is that the case? Well, think about it. These gray tree frogs, a longer call. There's a greater risk involved with that. Alright, a longer call means that predators are going to be able to zone in on you much better and find you. Alright, but it's also riskier, edgier, compared to your short call males, which is a little bit safer. Alright, so the females tend to go after those males that are a little bit riskier in this case. Alright, so birds. Birds, for instance, will look at the males. The males typically have brighter colorations, right? Brighter beak colorations, higher concentration of these pigments, these carotenoids in their tissues. Alright, so here the idea is that healthy birds must have the most colorful beaks and feathers. Right? Females choose colorful mates, more likely to have offspring, because they're better at fighting disease and feeding abilities. Alright, so looking at zebra finches as a model to support this hypothesis, that females prefer colorful mates, colorful males. Alright, so here you have your male zebra finch, right? Very colorful feathers and beaks. Alright, so looking at female choice for colorful beaks. Alright, you have brother pairs. Alright, so you have a control brother and a carotenoid supplemented brother. Alright, so they added carotenoids to their diet. And so looked at the proportion of which the females chose to mate with. And for most of the time, alright, those of the carotenoid supplemented were chosen more often.